All right, everyone. You know what time it is. It is Sunday. It is 10:06 a.m., August 28th. Thank you for joining us. This is the Civic Second. Let me go ahead and change to our Civic Second branding here. Oh, yeah. Well, we had Industrial Workers of the World on for our last show. Shout out to Gordon and Sean there. But today, we got Jeff Gamble. All right, and you already know what he does. Analyst extraordinaire, advocate in the community. Big things, big things. Let's go on and bring him on up.
Hello.
How are you doing today there, Mr. Jeff?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, how's your week been?
The week's been interesting. There's been a lot going on this week, and a lot of people working together on hard issues and trying to fits right in with our theme for today, which is our democracy is really worth the effort.
You came with a loaded show today.
Yeah,
we're gonna definitely have a good conversation. While I'm getting this stuff set in the background. Wednesday we had our community breakfast and we had some conversations about our planning. Can you kind of articulate how that might fit into today's discussion?
I think it does fit in with today's discussion in terms of whether the police should be at that meeting at this point, and what their role in the government is at this point. It'll be, I'm hoping to tie that in as we go through this, because I think it does relate to that whole discussion that we had about how do you be inclusive, how do you and in this case how do you bring lived experience into the conversation if you want to bring in somebody who's been arresting them. I mean, so it's how do you whose views should be at the table, and how do you have, and this is what I'm talking about globally for today, is just this whole idea of how do you bring all these views to the table and talk about things, and but with that discussion, I think it really is a question of who should be at the table, which is a little different. But yeah, I would love to get in that towards the end, maybe.
We will for sure. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up our presentation for today. And again, shout out to Jeff for all of his work, right? All the advocacy work, and then doing all this preparation on the back end so we can have a coherent conversation, which is fantastic. So today is the Civic Second, the City Council Roundup. August 28, 2022. Is democracy really worth all the effort it takes? Whoa, what a loaded question that is. Wow. Should we hold our response until the end on how we're going to answer this after you present the information?
I think so, yeah.
You might change my mind. You might reinforce how I'm thinking.
Well, I'm hoping everybody thinks it's working. And the reason this is, and you'll see why this is so pertinent today, because it just, well, I think as we go into it, we'll see. So
we're going to go ahead and recap the weekly meeting, the city mayor's relations, and also upcoming meetings. That's kind of on our agenda here.
Yep. Okay. All right. This is a work in progress, so I will just wing this.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah. So the study session, just to be brief, what did they cover? They covered the noise ordinance, which we'll cover a little bit about, which the mayor vetoed the city council's noise ordinance.
Really?
Yeah. And then what else did they talk about? They talked a lot about the MFTEs. They're talking a little bit about that again, the multifamily tax exemptions. And I've posted, that's been an ongoing conversation. So I've been posting all these parts of the conversation as they come up on the conduit. And we're up to MFTE part 4. So you can go all the way back to the explanation if people want to look into that issue. And it is a bit, and the multifamily tax exemption, just to be really quick about it, is it's a tax break that the city gives to developers to develop multifamily housing. The thought being that if you create more multifamily housing, then the prices will come down and we'll get affordable housing just from the sheer amount of housing that's built. Unfortunately, the JLARC, I forget what. Oh, maybe I should give that link to you. But it's the state joint legal something. Anyways, they did an analysis of these MFT programs in Washington, and they're kind of they're an over. I have to look up what they are, but anyways, they released a report that basically said that there's no indication that just creating more housing creates any more low-income housing or affordable housing. There's no, so anyway, so that's up there. Finance and Parking Committee meeting. Trying to remember what the big things are for that. And I'm skipping out on some. Oh, I think they did. They talked more in depth about the multifamily tax exemption. But anyways, both of those complete sessions are posted online on the Conduit. So if you want to go watch those, and I think I may have posted a couple summary clips from those. But basically, it's been a kind of a slow week, and next week they're off for the third week.
Oh, that's right. It is the third week.
Or the fifth week or whatever it is.
Fifth week, yes. The third city council meeting. There is no third.
That's what, yeah. So I'm gonna be off next Sunday too, because I'm gonna go attend the Islander Festival, which
I will be there as well. Shout out to Bailey and his team.
So yeah. So where
ready for me to forward?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
All right, so this really comes back to
Sparta. Sorry, I couldn't.
Athens, Sparta, and the open societies in Rome. So in classic political philosophy theory, which has some white bias in it, I would say. But if you go, but there's a lot of our government comes from this whole idea of, is it better to have a government that is authoritarian and makes decisions strictly from the top, mostly from the top? Or is it better to be an open society where everybody takes part in the decision making and everybody, you have democracy, so you have all that?
Yeah, I hear you, Jeff, but that's difficult because, sometimes I'm of the mind that sheeple need direction. You know what I'm saying? And we're just a bunch of lemmings that if we're left to our own devices, we'll just do things to our own detriment. And then on the other side, yes, mostly I'm for democracy, I would say. I know I don't sound as enthused when I'm saying
yeah. And
it depends on when you ask me.
Yeah. So these are kind of the extremes pictures here. So on the left, you have people like Reverend Barber, who are just pushing for opening, getting people at the table. Everybody deserves a seat at the table, right? That whole concept. You've got the squad doing the same thing, kind of pushing to get more voices, more diversity, equity, inclusion, all that stuff. More voices, and so everybody should have a seat at the table, and that's what having an open society is about. And on the other side, you have and this is a picture from the Proud Boys rally or something, where the guy has on his shirt, Pinochet did nothing wrong. They're straight up saying, no, we want an authoritarian government run by the people who can lead a strong government and push things through. And if anybody knows the history of Pinochet, it's pretty ugly. I mean, when you have a completely authoritarian government.
Can you go into that a little bit? Because all of our listeners don't.
Yeah, and I'm not a great history. I'm not a good history person. I'm more of follow the concepts, and you look at Russia and China, they have the same type of, we can be more efficient and stronger and better society if we have a select group of people making those decisions at the top and telling everybody else what what they should be doing. Kind of building on what you were saying, that people are sheep and they're not smart enough to make their own decisions, and they need to have a strong authoritarian presence like President Trump to tell them what is the real truth.
Okay. I guess
Yep.
one other thing that I appreciate you going into that. Again, I'm of two minds on this, and it just depends on the time that you have this conversation. Uh, you know, it, some of my conflict comes from, when we say that everyone should be at the table. Does that mean, anarchists, folks that just want to burn it to the ground and don't want to actually try to solve the issues?
Oh, well,
Uh,
right there, that's a fantastic example because that's a total misrepresentation of anarchists.
Talk about it.
And so if you were to get an anarchist in the room, you would probably learn that they're all about freedom and not having that the government control is what's causing the problems. It's the government police. If you let people, it's a more, I think it's based on a more positive view of humanity, in that if you take away the government and the structures, people will actually work together. And I think you do see that when things break down, that people do join communities and get together, and then the government comes back, and then so I think there is an argument to be made that government is causing the problems. But there is, but that whole, and I would urge anybody who is really interested in anarchism to go read, I'll look up her name, I'm going to post that at the end.
Yeah,
um
dude.
because I'm blanking on names, which I always do. But anyways, the where was I going with that? Was I going with atheism, or not atheism? I'm sorry, anarchism. Um, and it really, for me, so I'm a Unitarian, and I come from that background, and we have this firm belief of the dignity and worth of every individual, and so everybody has dignity and worth, and so what you don't really have a right to tell anybody else what to do, and they don't have a right to tell you what to do.
Is
Um,
Unitarianism a religion, a
Yeah,
philosophy?
it's a religion. It's an open religion, so it's all about searching for meaning as opposed to it's deeds. They like to say deeds, not creeds, and there are much better spokesmen for Unitarian Church than I am. And I don't even think
Oh,
I don't
oh,
know.
that's awesome. No,
Yeah,
because
it's
I'm
cool.
learning, right? I
Yeah,
don't understand it, but again,
yeah,
I wanna have a conversation. So,
yeah.
would Unitarianism be like sometimes I'll see, like, on a license plate or on the side, I'll see all the symbols of the different religions, like, and it says "coexist" and it's spelled that way. Is that
Right.
like Unitarianism?
Yeah, and I think,
Okay.
again, I'm going to probably butcher this, but um, the idea is that, if you look at God and the universe and everything as like an elephant, right? There's that whole idea that each religion is kind of picking a different part of the elephant, but there's that whole, I don't know, whole inner thing that drives everything, which is kind of love, I guess I would say, for lack of a better word. um and and so how you so each religion has some truth in it, and so I think Unitarians are all about really finding that truth that speaks to them, speaks to us personally, from all the religions. And so it's we draw on, so you'll see Jewish ceremonies, you'll see Hindu ceremonies, you'll see atheists. I don't know if atheists have ceremonies, but there's a large atheist population within the Unitarian Church as well. So it's
Really?
really less about what your core belief is than about your search for meaning and truth. And
So this really is about everyone, atheist, agnostic,
yeah,
Muslim,
right,
Hinduism, all of it,
right,
Catholicism, everyone together. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
I appreciate that.
yeah, sure. And
So,
so,
and
oh,
and just
so
guide
anyways,
me, Jeff.
okay, what?
I'm just gonna ask you to guide me. So if I take us down a rabbit hole with questions, you pull us back.
I love your rabbit holes though, so I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, so going back to your original point, so then if you're having giving everybody a seat at the table, um, maybe a better example, what you're trying to say is if you have um,
Contrarianism?
somebody who's intolerant, say a straight up
Hmm.
racist, a straight up Nazi supporting racist at the, I don't know. At that point, do you need to tolerate intolerance? There is a gray area, right? Is this person in it for the global, for the collective good, or are they? Um, they pushing for fascism? You know what I mean? I'm not
I
sure if
hear
I'm
what you're
explaining.
saying. I think that's what makes it so hard today because you don't see, or there are very few instances of, sheet wearing Klan members, and you can say, "Hey, that's racism right there. That's white supremacy," right? It is very subtle and very gray, and so it's like, I think that's the reason why it hasn't really been eradicated, right? It's kind of questionable. It's like, well, maybe this is what it is. Maybe this is not that, but we know that this is what it is, and that's what we're going to whack a mole on. And so the game is, well, let's take off the sheets and put on our stethoscopes and our you know judicious robes and everything else, and our police uniforms, or whatever the case may be, our teacher outfit, and you're not really going to know, right? So, but we're saying everyone is in the space. You know what I'm saying? So maybe anarchists might not be the right term, but folks that are just coming bomb throwers, right? They just come into a room and they just give the opposite view. They're not trying to move the conversation forward or add to it. They're trying to stifle the growth of the collective.
Yeah, and this gets to the exact problem of democracy. Yeah, and it's much easier to say, "Screw this, do what I've decided, or else you're out," right? And we all want us to do that. We want to say, "No, my way is the only way. Forget it," right? But democracy, that's what makes democracy so hard, is that you got to deal with the guy who just came to town and has everything, all the answers. You got to deal with the guy who says, "No, we have to do it the way we've always done it." You have to deal with the person who is there with their own personal things that they're trying to. All that is the messy part of democracy that slows everything down, and keeping the conversation going is it's hard. And it's interesting. I just one of the major lessons I've learned along these lines recently from a good friend of mine, Joe Walter, is that it's really about commitment. It's committing to working together as people in past your differences,
Hmm.
and agree. What is that? There's a religious term for that too.
Please don't say agree to disagree.
No, no, it's and sometimes you have well, um, anyways, I'm, what I'm trying to say is that you commit to working past your differences, right? And
Well, it's like
and
a
some
social contract.
thank you. That's what I was looking for. So you have a contract with each other, yes. A compact or a contract, yes.
So
Uh,
Christina's in the chat. She says, "How do you know?" And I think I'm not
how do
sure
you know?
when that was. We were on
Uh-oh.
down in the rabbit hole. So, uh, Christine, if you want to type what that was in regards to, because we
Oh,
got
who's a
lost there. That
racist?
could
Maybe how do you know who's a racist? I wonder.
be right, and I think that's exactly my point. Right, is it's not so clear cut. So when you're saying you want everyone at the table, but you're saying, well, you don't want outright racist, right? How do you know someone is straight fascist?
Right. Well, I mean, if you're inviting the Proud Boys to be at the table, then you're and that's what I was thinking. So so for I mean, yeah, you don't know. Um, People have complex worldviews. You don't really know what they are until they get in a room. But I was talking about just on the face of it. If would you invite the Proud Boys to a meeting to discuss poverty in the inner city? I don't know. I don't think so. Um, but I think this is getting off the topic of what I was trying to get to, which is still again, that authoritarian, and maybe, and there's probably the gray area between authoritarianism and democracy. I think that's probably true. Um, but what's scary right now is in the United States, we're seeing a real push to get rid of people's voting rights, to get rid of to anything that where you can hold accountable your elected officials. All that stuff is pushing the boundary way away from democracy in my mind. Um, so I mean, just Trump. If Trump was able to pull off his coup, that's then we've. And I just read something in the paper today that's I don't know, Guardian, um, in the Guardian that said we're about 4 months away from losing our electoral rights because of the people who've just been elected to be Secretary of State in all these states. So when I'm talking about authoritarianism or democracy, we're straight up talking dictatorship when you bring it all the way up the line. And so at the national level, there's a big push to get rid of democracy. I mean, to get rid of it all, just straight up force. So that, and to me, that goes opposite from where we've been moving as a society, getting more people at the table. And I know, yeah, okay, there's some people that probably shouldn't be at the table. I'll admit that. But 99% of people should have a voice at the table. I don't know. But let's move on. Let's move on. This is the crux of this
I'm
conversation.
fascinated.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
got
me too.
You got me a thought. All right.
Okay.
They definitely don't like your cartoons, so those
Oh,
are
I don't know why
definitely
I don't know why that's in there. I didn't mean to put that.
Yeah, I think they're somehow they're copyright. So
Yeah, I didn't even mean to have that in there. So that's
no, it's okay.
somehow a
It's pretty
mistake on
powerful.
my.
But go ahead, continue.
I think that was a editing problem. I copied a slide. Shoot, it's supposed to. Yeah, that picture's not supposed to be on there. So anyways,
Don't even worry
yeah,
about
okay. Anyways, so the first one, and these are all easy reads at thousands of pages. No, they're not. They're both really heavy lifts. And the history of the Peloponnesian War is all about the war between Athens and Sparta. And again, the classic version of the authoritarian versus democratic society. But one of the most important books I've read recently in terms of political thought and political philosophy is The Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper, who was a really famous mathematician and scientist. And he makes the argument that it's really it really is about getting people in the room, opening up society so that everybody can take part in society, that nobody's shut out of society, nobody should have decision making. And he makes their argument that, it's not, and forget about all the stuff about a class warfare, about workers, movement, all these like global things that are that put a theory on why we're where we are at. And just focus on the problem at hand. Like if the problem is that people don't have a place to sleep, do something. If it doesn't work, do something else. It's defining the problems you want to solve and focusing on the problems you want to solve, as opposed to the philosophy behind what you're trying to do. And it really spoke to me. But anyways, those are two books I would recommend reading.
Okay, that makes
So,
sense to me.
So does that make so?
Yeah, I can follow that. So those are good reads there.
Okay. All right. So what the heck does this have to do with the city council and the Bremerton? What you're seeing is,
Go ahead.
Yeah, what's going on in Bremerton city government right now is you're seeing the same conversation playing out. You're seeing the mayor saying, no, you elect me for 4 years, leave me alone after that. I'm gonna say what's right for this community. And not that he doesn't talk to people, but it is really a top down. He's running it more as an autocracy than a democracy in terms of the actual decision making. And I think, and why do I say that? So the first thing he did with this week was he vetoed the noise ordinance. So the noise ordinance, they've been talking again, something they've been talking about for years, and came up because of some bar somewhere, but they've just going around for years. And finally this year, the city council said, all right, we've done it. We've passed our noise ordinance. We've unanimously passed our noise ordinance, sent it to the mayor. And the mayor said, well, you can play the video.
All right, I'm going to just play the audio here for everyone.
Consider ordinance number 5453, amending chapter 6.32 of the Bremerton Municipal Code entitled Noise Levels. Mayor Wheeler.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Council President. So on August 3rd, 2022, the City Council unanimously adopted amendments to the Bremerton Municipal Code entitled Noise Levels. On August 11th, I exercised my authority and vetoed the ordinance. So I've sent you my objections. There was attachments that went with my letter, and it's now up to you to consider and my objections.
All right. So you don't want to present those at all, Mayor Wheeler?
They're in your packet. I was debating whether to just read what's in front of you, and I thought we'd just get.
I just meant for anybody who's watching.
All right. So that was
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and this is a good civics moment, right? So it's the checks and balances of government that so the city council passes something, the mayor can veto it. And then and I should have looked this up, but I assume that the override of the veto is a unanimous decision of the city council. So if this was passed with a unanimous, I'm not sure why this wouldn't go through again. But there's that.
So help me understand, because
okay.
I'm new to this side of the world. So, we have this noise ordinance, and city council wanted to do something with the noise, and the mayor said, nope, I don't agree with that. I'm going to veto it, right? Now he gives it back to them to do what? What are their options?
Yeah, I think they can either make modifications to it to essentially take in the input from the mayor and change the ordinance, or I'm pretty sure that they can just override his veto. There's got to be a veto override, but actually I should have looked that up, but I'm sure there is.
So help me understand. So when I think about what you were saying, right? Authoritarianism versus democracy. And I think the argument is that our democracy here in the United States isn't perfect, but many would argue that it's the best platform that exists globally today, right? Or may have ever existed in the time of mankind, as flawed as it is. That being said, right, isn't our democracy, the way that it works is that we vote someone in, the mayor, and the mayor basically is there to address our interests and run the city, right? And then we've got city council that maybe holds the mayor accountable to make sure that our interest in the different individual districts in Bremerton hold him accountable. Is that how I'm looking at that?
I think it's kind of backwards.
Okay.
The legislature is always the supreme power, really, in any government, in our national government, in our local government.
So who's the
legislature? And that is based on that bias towards democracy and saying we don't want a king, we don't want just rulers, we want to have it based in the people. So the people have to have the way to.
So in your scenario, who's the legislature here? City council?
The city council is the legislature.
Okay, so they're the power structure is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, but the way this is, but that's not the way things have been working. At the city level, frankly, it's been a good old boy thing for years at the city level.
Well, let's keep it to this particular topic.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I'm just saying, if you have one small group of people that are on the city council and the mayor's office, you don't really see it as. I mean, there's no conflict. There's no. You can get a very unrepresentative. You can get a closed society. I think we've coming from a closed society. I guess what I'm trying to say at the local level, where it was just a small group of people making decisions, and I think that explains a lot of our. Well,
but isn't that how we've set up our democracy, right?
Well,
I mean, it's not practical to have 330,000 people vote individually, assuming that's the population of Kitsap, on this noise ordinance, right? So we elect a representative for each part of the city to go and advocate on our interest, right?
Right, and they're supposed to set the direction of the city. I mean, we went through remember that long thing we went through about the description of the city council powers? I mean, it really
Right.
comes down to what's enumerated in the city charter. And as we saw, if you read the city charter, it's very clear that the city council's role is to set the direction of the city and to provide oversight, and that the role of the executive, the mayor, is to carry out those wishes. Now, not that the mayor doesn't have an input like the president. It's very similar to the national, right? And so the
So hold on,
president.
hold on, hold on,
Okay,
because I
sorry.
don't want you to go too
Okay,
far. Well,
okay,
I'm trying
okay,
to stay in this frame, so we've got
okay,
this example to have our
okay.
conversation from. So the noise ordinance came from city council, and the mayor vetoed it. True?
Right, right.
Okay. So you're saying so the city
Oh,
did its power, right, as the council, right? That the city council represents we the people because we
right,
voted them in to advocate for our interests. The mayor came over the top and vetoed it, right?
right.
Which is within his power because that's the power we gave that office as mayor, right?
Yep.
And now, while he's vetoing it, he has to give it back to city council, and city council can now
Have the final
unanimously come
word.
back over the top over him.
Correct.
Or so that
Correct.
sounds like right now democracy is still working the way that it was intended.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's a good point, and that is one of the beauties of our system, as we say, is that it was really meant to balance both of those: the authoritarian, the get things done, the fight wars, things that supposedly need a top level decision, um, over on the executive, and that. And the executive has always been kind of a check on the majority, right? There was a big fear that you would have mob rule, they called it, majority rule. Their big fear was that the poor people would vote to take away everything the rich people have, basically. So how do you put in a protection against that? You put in a protection with the checks and balances of the executive. But they did the belief is that, but when push comes to shove, you need to have it go back to the people.
So help me understand where your conflict is in this
Okay.
example.
Okay, and this so it's always a balance of how much power the executive has in relationship to the legislature. At the national level, you see this clear. Well, okay, let's stick to the local level. So right now, the mayor is controlling, really setting the limits on the information that the city council can receive, and he's using his veto power, which is totally his right. But on the other hand, again, you've got the people who are supposed to be setting the direction and doing the oversight are getting paid less than $1,000 a month. They're supposed to spend they expect them to spend 10 hours a week doing it, overseeing a $250 million budget, which, as you know, I mean, I put in myself just covering this stuff, probably full time. I don't know,
A lot
some
of time.
hours,
Yeah.
some time. And so when your legislature is underfunded and not able to provide its role, I think that's a detriment to that balance. And in the
And I
next
could
clip,
agree with you on that, but I think that what does that have to do with this particular thing here?
yeah,
Is what you're saying is I think you're making a different argument, right? I agree 100% with what you're saying. I think they should be paid more, but we vote in the mayor, we vote in city council, we've given the directives that the mayor can do in his position, right, as the city manager. City council said, hey, we're going to do whatever with this noise ordinance. He looks at it and he says, hey, I'm the city manager, and from what I see, I don't think this is the best interest of the city, so I'm going to veto this, but now I'm going to give it back to you, city council, and you can either modify it or you can come back over the top of me, and then that will be the final say. Is that accurate?
yes, yeah, and I agree. That's the way it's supposed to work.
So,
And
but that is how it's working.
that is
Current.
that is how it's working. Well, for this specific issue, yes, that's how it's working.
And that's what I'm saying. We're just talking about this specific
The
issue.
noise
Otherwise,
ordinance.
we move the goalposts, right? And then
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can't
yeah,
have a
yeah.
coherent conversation. So, I'm trying to figure out where your conflict is or what
Yep.
your issue is with
Yep. So
this
I guess what I'm
particular
trying to say
process.
is there's a push and pull between the authoritarian side and the democracy side. And if the mayor is controlling the information that the city council can receive, and this is not necessarily pertaining to the noise ordinance, and maybe I shouldn't have started with the veto of the noise ordinance, but and that was just to point out that the mayor does have, anyway, that power relationship. But I agree with you that you can ultimately override that from the legislature, and that's I'm perfectly fine with that. I agree with that. But I think the next clip kind of gets into more of what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, let me play that one.
Okay.
And I just want to let our viewers know, like, a lot of us are very much babes in regards to politics and government and how these things operate. So I hold a master's degree and I don't understand what's happening. Like, I'm learning what's happening, right? I'm asking questions because this hasn't been an area of interest, right? For me and several people that I know, regardless of educational status, right? Many of us have felt so disenfranchised by the system that we don't even participate in it. Maybe we vote for Obama because he's the first black president, or there's other big issues like abortion. But outside of that, it's like whatever, they don't really care about our needs anyway. So we don't understand how this works. And so what I'm getting at is when we're looking at the noise ordinance and you're being critical of local government, it's does that example fit with what we're talking about, like
Probably.
overall, right?
I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure that particular thing does fit with what we're talking overall.
Good, and I just want to make sure that our
Yeah, I
audience
think.
knows that. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we lose all other arguments if we don't separate it out and say, hey, in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
instance here,
This lesson plan was not
democracy.
well planned out.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
No one's having these conversations. That's why it's so
Yeah.
important, right? So
Yeah.
in this instance, what you're saying is democracy is operating the way that it's supposed to in
Correct.
the noise ordinance example, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
there
I am.
are
Yes.
but there are other very messy things in our
Yes.
local government, and
Yeah.
things maybe the mayor has done or decisions or city council and their pay or whatever that
Right. Right.
both things
Thank
can
you.
be true
Yes.
simultaneously, right? So
Absolutely.
it's just important not to assume that everyone can
Yeah.
follow the discussion, which is why, like, all right, to be clear, this is what we're saying here. So
Yeah. Thank you.
good. All right, we'll move on. And please, folks, type your questions in the chat because this is how we all learn, which is really important. Joe says, yeah, if the system is broken, thanks for articulating what's wrong with it. Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to play this next video. Mayor Wheeler reduces staff support for city council and the public.
Asked, I'll stand by it then. Administration has definitely asked that we go through the mayor's office with things. Okay, so this is not random. This is because of the volume of requests coming from our department. And again, the staff, I will say that these things have happened over the years in different cycles. It tightens up and sometimes it loosens up, but we have sort of, our behavior has caused us to maybe lose some of the free access we've enjoyed. Anna?
Okay, well, still not fully understanding this because as a private citizen, whenever staff was like, I've got to go do something else, they would just say, I got to go do something else, or I don't have time for this, or it's going to be a month before I can get back to you. And I just went, okay. So I don't understand why.
Anna, we have been told as a body that they're busy and they don't have time for this.
They don't have time to represent the people of Bremerton.
That's your job.
And I'm going to do that job without information necessary to do my job.
There's no limited access to information. You just need to go through the mayor's office.
Is this a directive from the mayor that everything needs to go through the mayor's office?
Ooh, fantastic question there to end off on that. Elaborate there.
And then that conversation goes on, and I would urge people to listen to that more of that conversation. And so this is where I think things are breaking down. You know, the and I've noticed it from my end too. I think as more people have tried to, this year especially, there's been more questions asked at city council meetings and by the community. And I understand. I think the mayor's office, the staff of the city government, is getting overwhelmed with all of our requests. And I know I've been cut off. They will not answer any of my requests or emails anymore. I have to
Wow.
file the official freedom of information request mostly. And so it seems like that's what they're going to, unless there's a freedom of information request. Well, I don't know. I can't say that globally because I don't know from their end. But anyways, but to say to the city council is that, you know, you we'll give you the information you need, and otherwise just pass what we tell you. It's what I'm hearing from the mayor at this point. And it is that really, and he is really pushing hard from the more authoritarian side of saying, my office is in charge. You're here to support me. And you hear that in the tone from Mr. Goodnow. You know, we have been told by the mayor's office that we cannot have this information anymore. Well, that's kind of a flipping of the power structure. And that's a really scary flipping of the power structure. In my mind, giving that what we talked about before, that the legislature should be the primary body. So that's where I have a little worries with the current city government, and but I really love the way the city council is sticking to their guns though, and they're like, no, we have, and I think they know they're learning their authority too and learning their powers. They're all, most of them a bunch of them are relatively new, but
Yeah.
what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I think that goes a long way to support your argument. I almost feel like we should have reversed the video.
I know.
But that's great because it just illustrates, right? A lot of this is processing information in a logical way, you know, moving away from red herring and straw man arguments and things like that, moving the goalposts. And so I think this is great. And to your point of, you know, city council only getting $1,000 a month, right? That's, I would say at least at the minimum, you know, the fair market value of rent should be paid. It's a lot of work. If you want them to do the job correctly, then they need to be able to focus on the job of advocating for the city. And really hard to do if you're trying to run another job at the same time.
Or the other possible solution is to put something in the budget to give the city council their own staff. I pretty strongly believe, now that I've watched things over the years, is that the city council should have their own attorney, absolutely, and their own staff that's doing the research for them. And they should have access to all the data that's available at the city. You know, and
that would be my second point. That would be my second point to say, you know, I agree with that too. So those two things I think need to definitely be in place. The question would be is, where do you take that from? Where do you take the adequate, I mean, what would it take for a city attorney? We're talking about probably 6 figures, right? And then for each one, how many city council are there? 7 for them to have staff, right? You would say they probably would need staff of 1 to 3 individuals. Or
not
just
each, not each though. I think
maybe a staff of 4 to do all of the research and interpreting data and getting them what they need. Like,
I think one or two FTEs would probably do that. Like at the congressional level, they have the Congressional Research Service that does this for the Congress, and so you can set together. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe it shouldn't be the city that sets that up. Maybe us citizens should set up that body and be the people that inform the city council and do all that part for them.
But it would need to be compensated, right? I mean, no one can take that on for free, and then they would need the access. So let's say it was, like you said, 2 or 3 FTEs plus an attorney. You're talking about, with benefits, maybe another $300,000-$400,000 a year. Where do you pull that from? Do you pull that from the homeless and housing budget, right? Then it becomes a thing of where does the money come from?
Yeah. Although we're sitting on a $50 million surplus.
We are right now, but that's not typically the case, right? So
I don't know
where do we pull it from?
Yeah. Well, you pull it. You have to make a decision. Exactly. Do you want more parking or do you want more services for your community? Do you want more? What are the big things? The money's going to parking and water. I still got to look into this water thing. Man, this water, it's just out of control up here. And I thought we were drowning in water up here. But anyways, again,
But when you have everyone at the table, they are going to rank their interests differently. So, if I'm a business owner and the homeless population is negatively impacting my business, that may not be where I want the money to go, right? I want it to go somewhere else, or I might want it to go to education because I have kids,
Right. It is absolutely a choice on whether you want to spend money to save people's lives and give them shelter, or if you want to invest in infrastructure. Absolutely. It's absolutely a city choice. And that is a crucial choice that's happening right now, especially in our city government, where there's zero social funding. There's zero funding for any sort of housing or social programs or anything. It's all going to the police. And again, this goes back to the authoritarian government. What do you see with authoritarian governments? They kept building up their police, their armies. And we're seeing that at the local level. The police budget is just it's just growing every year astronomically. It goes up every year. And why is that? Maybe it's because you're not having an inclusive society. Maybe you're excluding so many people that you need to hire more cops. So to me, the increase in putting everything onto the police department goes hand in hand with authoritarian governments.
Joe wants you to say more about the benefits of having a city council attorney.
Yeah, and before you brought up the 6 figures, I'm like, wow, that is expensive. But
well, I mean, you said attorney, right? I'm like,
yeah. But okay, so right now the city attorney, and again, I would love to have her on the show because I have so many questions for the city attorney that I don't think she would mind answering. Anyways, but one of them is so she's supposed to represent both the mayor and the city council.
Your camera went off there, Jeff.
Oh. Oops, sorry. She officially represents both the city council and the mayor, but she leans more towards the mayor in most of the things she says. But her role is to represent the mayor and the city and the city council all together, which to me that's a hard thing to do. But what was I going to say? And to represent the city to represent the city. And so she's the one that really says this needs to go on executive session. This needs to be done in private. So that she makes a lot of decisions like that. And my question is, who's watching out for the public's legal interests? Like, I don't know. It seems like I don't know. It's always seemed to me that the city council would benefit from having their own attorney, because I don't know how you can.
I agree with you on that. I would say a less insidious thought on that would be if she is trying to cover the interests of both city council and the mayor. It's really easy to get inundated with what the mayor wants as far as information and you're so busy, which I think goes to what Anna Mockler was saying, right? Is, well, when are you going to have time to get the information, for us so we can advocate for our constituents, right? So it's like, hey, we don't have time. I'll get back to you in a month. That's exactly the issue, right? And I've only got this short amount of time to do the will of the people. I'm new. I've got to get up to speed, and then I've got to wait a month for something, and the people are like, hey, come on, what's going on? Where's these sidewalks? How come, homeless folks don't have toilets? And it's like, it's so frustrating. And then people get disenfranchised, right? And they say, well, you're not a good city council person. And it's like, well, no, I'm actually trying to do the best that I can with what I have, but I'm getting caught up in this bureaucracy and red tape. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a more favorable glass half full outlook on it.
Yeah. And I think, yeah. And even and from an equity standpoint, there should be pay for the city council member, because if only rich people can afford to be your city council, there's a real problem there. It should really be open to any citizen, regardless of income, can be a city council member, and that's not. I mean, that already sets such a huge bar of it changes who gets into office, and we've already have we already have a situation in Bremerton where you have a voting population, a population that votes, um, that is totally different, has totally different needs, or has very different needs from the people who don't vote. If you look at the difference between the people who vote and people that don't vote, there are some pretty stark differences. And you see that so when you say democracy, oh, we can vote for these people, that's kind of broken down. So poor people are not voting, renters are not voting, homeless people are not voting. Who's voting? People with the most property, people who own houses, people who are most involved in the current status quo. And that may be overstating, but if you look at the data, it's pretty clear that the people who it's poor people that aren't voting, basically. And so you've got rich people making most of the decisions when it comes to electoral politics. And I don't know what to do about that.
I got some ideas. I think
Yeah.
one thing that we could do, it won't fix everything, but I do believe that it would resolve a lot of issues, and that goes from local all the way to the top, is you say, okay, one, you get dark money out of politics, right? But two, when you run, if you're in a job, that job will be held for you, whatever that job is. And when you're done out of office, you can go back to that job. There is no benefits that you can gain from while you're in office, stock tips, real estate, all these other things that folks do. And then when you're done on the other side, you cannot work in any of those sectors that you oversaw directly or indirectly. So, that would be illegal for life. So if you have aspirations of getting into real estate, then maybe you don't want to go into government work, because on the other side you've got this ability to profit, or you're going to go and join the military industrial complex, but you've been acquiescing to the military lobbyists while you were in office. You get rid of that, you go back to where you were before, with no benefits. All of a sudden my kids are accepted into this Ivy League school because I did such and such for whatever. I think that would help tremendously. Joe says that is a worthy campaign, helping people understand that the power of the people is in their votes. Government is the standard task of political parties, but they are not succeeding.
Get out the vote, I think is what she said. Yeah.
Or get out the vote.
Yeah, and how does this play? How does this play out at the city level? Then, do you think what you were just saying?
So I think there. We're struggling, right? I've heard some of the stories from some of our city council on, how they're trying to maintain their livelihood before and during, city council. I'll use Jennifer Chamberlain because she talked about having multiple jobs and just to make rent and do these things, and her significant other and whatnot. I think they should not need to worry about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter, food, things like that, while they are in office. And so again, if you've got your a job, you're able to come back to that job, but you be very very careful if you think that you're going on this real estate adventure, and now you're rubbing elbows with all of these real estate folks and property investors and whatnot, that you're going to be excluded from that
So
on the other side.
so you think that that the mayor and the city council should not be allowed to make money off the real estate market?
Hell no.
Because right now, Mayor Wheeler's wife owns one of the most successful real estate companies in town. They're killing it on real estate transactions. You've seen past city council members come in as renters and leave as multiple property owners.
Yeah. Hell no. If that should not be a benefit that you get for serving government.
Yeah, and the thing is that I don't know how you regulate that, because if you're in the mayor's office, you're in the city council, you know what's happening, you know what development's happening, it's you're already privy to inside information, and so how you bar someone from using that information, I don't know, but that'd be an interesting. So maybe an ordinance that says that anybody working for the city can't profit off of real estate. That would be that would shake things up.
Well, and
that would flip the power structure that exists right now, because that's exactly what the opposite of what we have right now. It is a real estate industry dominated government right now in Bremerton.
Well, and here's the thing: even if you say, hey, you know what, if it should be a basic right, healthcare, food, water, housing, no, you can't profit on any of those things. So if you're already into that before you run, I guess you would say, well, that would be excluding and not, that would be the opposite of democracy. It would just be taking from those that, are were in that position, but they have something to give in city government. Um, but it does create this imbalance, right? And then it's like, okay, so I have this benefit, and I have this information. I've cultivated these relationships now because the mayor is rubbing elbows with these developers and everything else, and now my wife could do business, yada yada yada. And I'm not saying that this is what's happened. I'm just using this as an example. And it's
And when
like,
when the mayor comes out and says, this is the best plan for creating affordable housing, and it looks an awful lot like something that creates a lot of profit for real estate agents, you have to wonder, where is his interest? And I think he probably does have a good argument for, we need to. I think he's following the old trickle down, idea that if you build up the top, it'll flow down to the bottom, right?
Well, what I'll say is I don't think this is an issue with Mayor Wheeler. I think this is an issue with our democratic structure as it stands today.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
For me, I feel like it doesn't matter who's in that position.
I would agree with that.
They're going to benefit in that way, right? We can look at Nancy Pelosi. We can look at, you know what I'm saying?
I apologize, Mr. Mayor Wheeler. I didn't mean to single you out. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. It is true.
We want to be fair, right?
Absolutely.
One, we don't know if there's some benefit there. You could say, hey, I can extrapolate based on this, and this may have happened, but we don't know for sure. And so therefore, how do you try to ensure going forward that isn't the case? Right. And I think, as a if all of us had our voices heard, I would surmise that those that are experiencing homelessness or unaffordable housing or paying way more than 30% AMI, to live would say, yeah, you should not be able to profit off of, basic American needs, right? Or human needs, housing, healthcare, food, yada, 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 right? Education. I think those are all, what we would say are God-given rights to being an American.
And I think so. Yeah, I think in the city we need more push towards democracy in terms of. I think we do need more community. I don't know if everybody needs to be at the table. We need a lot more people at the table in Bremerton, because I think there are a lot more diverse views that could be drawn upon, a lot of more expertise, a lot more, and instead of, kind of shutting things down and making, because that's, again, when you're when you're in an office like that, it's easier just to shut it down and make decisions in your group and then carry them out. But again, when you bring in more conversation and, what about this view and that view, it gets more complicated. But I definitely feel like the whole community needs to have much more involvement in this whole conversation of how we're running our city and what we want to see for our society.
So I put a question in the chat here, and I'm hoping people will answer it. How do you believe we, the people, can make democracy more democratic, particularly here in Kitsap County? So it's tough because, you have folks that run for office and they want to make change, right? They believe fundamentally, one, I could do a better job than who's there, right? I mean, that's what it's about. And I'm going to make change when I get there. So I go out and I rally votes, and I'm in office now, and I go to work to do just that thing. I think the trouble is we have elected, either at the local level, the national level, whatever, a lot of good people that talked a lot of good stuff on what they wanted to do to make this change. The problem is they go into this machine and they're fighting against this machine that just continues to operate the way that it operates. And so it's like, all right, there's some that have made some gains, but for the most part, it really kind of comes out as the status quo. And so we have to change the machine ultimately is what I think. Um, Otherwise you're throwing good people to the grinder and they come out changed, you know. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that statement there, Joe?
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I think, I just think more voices at the table just always helps. And so
And but what would that look like? So answer that question.
Okay.
How could we make
Okay.
Bremerton more democratic?
All right. So let's look at we bring it back to ML King Way, I guess.
Sure.
So who should be included in that discussion, and who has the answers? And wouldn't it be better to have instead of having it'd be nice to have a whole community discussion on homelessness and which I think you're doing, but maybe that I feel like that should almost be a part of the government already, that's happening, like that those conversations and community meetings and discussions are happening. I think so how do you open up the government more? I mean, that's kind of what we're asking.
That's the question. Yes, that
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
question.
yeah.
Because that's the whole thing, right? This
Yeah.
is the reason why we elect
Yep.
representatives, and we have, I believe,
Right.
it's 7 city council people. Correct me if I'm
Right.
wrong, right? Because we can't have 300,000 people all weighing in. We'd never get anything done. So we're hoping that representative for my District 1 is going to advocate for my needs and concerns, right? And you're saying it's a broken system. I agree with you. So how do we fix that, right? Because we can bring people to the table, which we are trying to do next month. But at the same time, it's still not practical to do that for water or education or roads or infrastructure building or, you know what I mean?
I don't know.
Broadband.
Well, okay. I think we're seeing, and we're getting into my philosophical, I think we are moving towards more direct democracy. So I think that we actually do have the technology to transition to a place where everybody's actually making the decisions themselves and then putting in, basically turning your representatives into stockbrokers who are like placing the bets on the market based on how they're being voted upon. I think that the representative government has some very racist background to it, really. I think it's good to have representatives if you all agree and you send your representative, but now we're sending representatives to Congress as a good example. How can one representative represent 500,000 people? There's no way you can represent the views of 500,000 people.
So, but
right?
again, how do you fix that? How do you fix the system?
Broadening it out, including all 500,000 people, if you can, or I don't know. But it's broadening. It's not, having a representative that represents 500,000 people it's not very democratic.
Well, again, we're thinking
so maybe you triple the size of the Congress. Maybe you make it so that there's, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 congressmen.
No. Keep it to the city.
Well, I'm thinking, okay, so how many? And so this brings up the real question of how do you represent the views of multiple people? How do you facilitate that conversation? How do you make sure that everybody's voice is heard? And yeah, these are all questions. But maybe it is that you have. But right now, so at the city level. I wish I had answers for this. I don't.
but so here's the thing. So here's my critique. I'm not in office, right? And I would be critical of those that are in. But if we're on this side complaining that we don't like what they're doing, but then you have no example on how to fix it, it's like, well, I mean, what do you want me to do? I'm doing the best I can in the system that's been created, right? So how do we change democracy so that it's more democratic? What does that look like from a systemic viewpoint? Do we need, 5 city council people from each district instead of 1? Do we do it by more neighborhoods of the districts, how they're carved out? So there's more representation. Like you have one from ML King. You have one, I think Manetta's in my district. You have one from, OC or the businesses downtown, right? Do you do that and make all 5 of those District 1 so that at least there's a representative from each kind of neighborhood body within that, and then they go forward to the council. So now there's 35 council members. Would that be a more democratic way to do it?
Gotcha. And yeah, the national level gets all murky, but at the city level, I think the solution is that people should become involved, be more involved and aware of what's going on in city council, because you do have a direct impact. Individual people do have an impact at the local level much more, and I think that gathering voices together and trying to get your voice heard in city council it's easier. I think it's an easier lift at the local level to open up our society than it is probably at the
Give me
national or
the
state
answer,
level.
not opinion.
What was the question again then?
How do you change democracy here in the city
At
level
city council.
so that it's more democratic, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
what I would believe is the way that I just formed it out, we could leave the national level the way that it is, right? If we the people, there's more impact locally, right? Because these things are the things that affect us day to day, right? What do we do on ML King? The feds aren't really thinking about one city block, in Bremerton, Washington, right? But we down here in the zip code, we are thinking about that, right? So if there's more representation here and we were to increase the districts by 5 city council as an example, right? Or maybe more. There'd be more bureaucracy here at this level, but there would also be more representation. But as it thins out, as the pyramid goes here to the federal level, because there were more voices at the table here at the local levels, then our interest would be more represented at the top level. You could still have 2 senators from each state, right? You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What is the solution? So I've given a scenario of a solution that I think would make our system more democratic here locally and would have impact federally. So what's your idea for that? Joe says approximately how many people actually vote for each individual city council? What percentage of the population vote in Bremerton? Ooh, we should get that information. Maybe the council members actually are representing the people who voted for them. I would say, Joe, to that, there's no possible way that even in the districts as small as Bremerton is, that they can do both. Because I would say in this regard, the folks on MMO King who are experiencing homelessness, their interests are counter to business owners that say that homelessness is a plight and a scourge on their businesses, right? So how do you square that circle? I think there is the Venn diagram where interest can converge is no one should be homeless and should have all the services. And if you do that, then the negative aspects of homelessness don't impact local businesses, right? That's the part where we all can agree, but we diverge when we're looking at our own interest, right? So business owners may not be looking at it as, no, you know what we need to do is we need to make sure that everyone is housed and everyone has their medical, physical, and mental health care and everything else. They're like, look, I just don't want to have my business impacted negatively, right? And maybe I don't want my taxes to go toward that. People that are experiencing homelessness, are like, I don't really care about your business. I'm here out in the street and I'm starving and I'm cold and I'm dying out here. So you see what I'm saying? So where's that crossover? So I would just say to that, Joe, that I don't think that in the district, I think that's part of the problem, right? Even as small as these districts are carved out, there are dueling interests in that. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think you picked a case where there's much agreement between the business owners and the people who live on ML King Way, and they're both saying, give these people some bathrooms for God's sakes. They're peeing all over the place, give them some bathrooms is what I'm hearing from business owners. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from the one I'm talking to, but the one or two. Yeah, I think that the city government, it is possible to change things, and I think it is possible for citizens to have a lot of input on their government. And I think we're seeing that this year, and that this is a much more responsive, inquisitive city council than I've ever seen since I've been here. And this show has been, getting more people to, there are more people becoming aware of what the issues are and what the conversations are. And I think that that's definitely helping. Whether you have more representative city council members or not, I also kind of don't like the way they drew the boundaries for them, but um, I think that's less important than supporting, giving giving the city council the support they need to feel like they have the information they need to make the decisions they're trying to make. I think that's the huge piece right now, that's holding us back from being a more inclusive Bremerton.
Well, I guess what my thought on that would be, I see a fallacy in that, and there's no perfect thing. So, uh, let's say you give them a city attorney, and let's say you give each city council person the staff, right? They have three, right? We've got an unlimited
We're
budget
going crazy.
in
Yeah,
that regard, right?
yeah, yeah.
What you still have is you have our system the way that it is designed. Poor people, disenfranchised, their voices not being heard, right? And those that are rich or have the opportunity to make their voices heard, make their voices heard. So ultimately, the interest is still not represented, right? So okay, yeah, the city council can do their research and get all the information they want, but the voiceless still aren't having their needs met.
And but the more the voiceless start raising their voices, the more you do see some pretty quick change. I mean, when the people, I think, even if you don't vote, that's not necessarily the only way to change policy. And I think that the city council does tend to reflect, the voters, in terms of, their emphasis on parking um, and streets and sidewalks as opposed to other things. But I think that's changing, and I think that's mostly because they're starting to hear a lot more of the conversations out there. And I think, and it's also a very progressive group of people right now in the city council. I think it's probably more progressive than has been in a long time. And so they are open to more conversations and listening more, I feel like. So I guess the answer is just to, organize, get people out and spread the
Mm.
word and knowledge um,
I
and vote.
smile because now I'm glass half empty, right? So
Yeah,
when
yeah.
George Floyd was murdered, police brutality actually increased over the next, the years after, right?
Right.
Didn't decrease. We still have qualified immunity. Nationally and globally, people were protesting, right? What's changed? Status quo.
Yeah.
Increased.
And apparently people weren't loud enough last time. Apparently it's going to have
What
to
you're
get a
saying,
lot
more
louder.
voices are making
Yeah.
their voices heard, right?
Yeah. And you're
And
right. I
we're
mean, and
still in
what's
the
happened
same
after
state.
George, and you're right. What's happened after George Floyd is just even more money is being put into police and even more, yes, is put into enforcement. And so, and we're seeing that in Bremerton too. So how do we get the city to stop spending on enforcement and start spending on care? Yeah, it's a struggle. Because right now the status quo is to have a very strong police force and to lock up as many people as possible to keep things in order. Um, and that's again, it goes back to my, are you trying to run an authoritarian government? Or are you trying to run a government that embraces diversity and everybody and has everybody at the table? Um, and so what we're seeing is, and what worries me is that in Bremerton, I've seen there's been a huge change in the conversation to talk about care. I mean, I'm really impressed with this city, how this conversation has changed in the last year or two. Um, but at the national level and other levels, I don't know. Things are. I don't know where I was going with that either. But um,
You're basically saying that change is happening.
I think change is happening, and I think the status quo is pushing back, and I worry that they're clamping, they're taking the money out of the economy, so they're causing people pain to try to, in my opinion, to get people back to work. And so people are being evicted everywhere. You're seeing evictions rise. You're going to see job losses pretty soon. You're going to see the collapse of the housing market again. That's going to wipe out all these people who are depending on their homes for their income. And so that's going to bring that's going to anger. That's going to bring that's going to create more crime. That's going to create more people acting out because they're being shut out of the system. And so then do we react with more care, or do we just go back and say, see, we need more cops. We need more people in jail. We have so many people. How more people locked up in jail than anywhere, right? Else. That's not a good strategy, right? And so just and we're seeing that play out right here in Bremerton. Do you want safety or do you want inclusiveness? Well,
I want both.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I want both, right?
Exactly. I think we can have
be
both.
safe to walk around. I don't want my building vandalized, right? Which it has been. I'm downtown, right? I've had my windows shot out downtown. I've had my van windows busted out. So yeah, I want safety and security, right? That's important to me. So I don't want it to have to be a choice.
Right.
I mean, it's a true story.
I agree.
What do you do? Like you said, our society is collapsing, and we're going to, police it to death. And then, that it is a problem that doesn't work. But at the same time, I do want the safety and security, right? I do want a response from the fire department and the police department when there's something that's happening, that's going on. And I'm saying that as someone who's had some very negative experiences with law enforcement, not just here locally, but in Seattle also, right? So again, both things can be true at the same time. But we do need to invest in people. Let me jump into what Joe was saying here. She says, let's get a team down on MLK to document police activity for 24 hours. Then we have something to refer when we talk to the cops about their behavior that we don't want. I think aren't there cameras down there?
I was just gonna say there's a camera there that's on. I'm wondering if we might be able to get footage from that camera. There's a police camera right there that watches everybody all the time. Or I don't know if it's, I don't know. But if there's a camera right there at the corner of Park and ML King.
And MLK. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are in conflict, right?
Right.
I mean, you and I have different ideals on drug use and decriminalization of drugs and its impact on society. So I mean, if you decriminalize it and then the behaviors that ensue from it become problematic, to me, I'm not sure how we square the circle on that. Like, what do we do there? But these are all really big issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, it's not a matter of just cutting off the police. So it's never been a matter of, just cut off the funding for police, defund police. I mean, that's not what it's about. What it's about is when you do that, when you say, okay, this is not a police activity, this is not a proper role for police to be handling this. For instance, enforcing drug use laws. We have reached a decision in this state that is not a role for the police. In enforcing drug use laws to stop people from the users. That is not a role of the police. And that's been.
So who's it a role for?
Exactly. So now you've got the same amount of drug use and you've got the same amount of harm that's coming. And not everybody who uses drugs is going to have harm, but there are significant people that are being harmed from the drug use. That we should be taking the money from the police and putting it into treatment, putting into options for those people, putting it into care, double up on doctors and nurses, as opposed to police and, court people. But to just say, we're just going to not, it's like the mental health, what we did with mental health, right? We said, we're no longer allowed to lock people up. So, all right, well, there's nothing else we can do. Well, that's ridiculous. Just because you can't lock people up, there are other alternatives. And I think it's hard for us to say, there's an alternative to forcing people. What
But
is
I
that?
think some of that is the short-sightedness of advocacy, right?
Hmm.
Where it's like, hey, I want to end police brutality, right? Or defund the police. But we don't often talk about where are you going to pull the money from? Are you going to actually shore up, these programs? Are you going to hire more mental health professionals? Are you going to create housing and
Right.
programs to catch the safety net for folks that are using drugs because you decriminalized it, right? You're not going to put them in the jail, right? So you want your kids to be able to walk down the street. I'd like for Layla to walk from my office to 7-Eleven. But would I be irresponsible to allow a 10-year-old to walk from my office down on Park to 7-Eleven by herself?
I don't think so. But I live in the
Oh, I
neighborhood.
would. There's no way in
I
hell
see,
I would do that.
I see children all the time, but there's their children
There's no
running
way
around
in hell I would do that,
MLK all over.
right?
Yeah. But then
Because,
I'm
she might
comfortable with it.
see someone using drugs.
Uh,
She might
yeah.
see someone urinating, right? So she may see
No, you're a good dad. Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
like it's an incomplete advocacy. It's like, no, this shouldn't happen. This is harmful. Yes, you're right. But are we gonna tax ourselves? Are we willing to do that to actually fix
Well,
the situation?
and
It's like we literally go halfway with these measures.
the thing is though that Seattle, Washington has consistently voted that yes, we do want to raise taxes for this. So they put this 1.5% mental health tax, right? That cities could use. Oh, you can use this now to fund your mental health program. What do? We give it to our police department to help enforce laws. I mean,
Well,
that's
to be fair, they've done more than that, right? I mean, I've
yeah.
applied for that.
I don't believe
I've
it. I want
applied for that grant, right? And
okay.
I can tell you where that money's gone. A lot of it's gone to Agape, Coffee Oasis, Kitsap Mental Health.
I thought it
So
all went to the Navigator program. I was
no,
wrong
no,
about that. All right, I'm
no.
sorry. Okay, yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't
for
realize
sure.
that.
No,
I thought it was
that
all went
money
to the
was
Navigator.
very well distributed
Okay.
throughout the community.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
But and then but at the state level, I think there are a lot of funds available. If the city wants to take advantage of that funding and beef up the care side.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it being a half measure, right? 1/10 of 1% isn't going to fix our situation. 5% might, but that's going to hurt. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so it's like, hey, man, I already can't pay my rent. So now you want to tax me 5% to, deal with the homeless problem? What about the housing problem? You see what I'm saying? What about institutional racism? So then it's always, well, what about? So how do we take a look at this and start to not attack the symptoms, but really get to the actual disease?
Right. And I think it all comes down to me. Right now I'm focused on the budget because the budget, to me, it really comes down to what's in the city budget. That is the bottom line of how you're making these decisions.
And I agree 100%. That's why I think nationalism is actually a good thing.
What's that?
I said that's why I think nationalism is actually a good thing.
Nationalism.
So you're. I'm gonna be very careful here. We are all educated people, right? So we're gonna be intellectually honest. However you think he may have meant it, there were things that were better in the past, right? So when Trump says make America great again, there were some things that worked better, right? The price of gas, the price of housing, right? You could buy a house for $50,000. Now it's $400,000, right? Take the person away from the statement or their particular intention. There were some good things in the past, right? The black family was more of a unit back in the 60s and the 50s because they were forced to, because the situation was so bad. Now today we're in a very bad situation, and that's a whole nother situation. But I would like to see Make America Great Again in regards to the black family, right? The situation was far worse. Hoses, dogs, everything else, right? Jim Crow. However, it forced us to really be together as a family unit. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have that to have that happen. We're talking about the values, right? Made in America used to mean something, but right now, we're willing to pay for this $1,000 iPhone, and it would cost $3,000 if Americans made it because it would cost so much for our housing. We're not building our own infrastructure. Our bridge are falling apart. So train Americans vocationally so that they can earn a livable wage, so they can take care of their families and themselves. And that's where I think nationalism is a good thing.
Okay, but to bring it back to the city.
But that's what I'm saying. So you're right. I'm agreeing with you. Budget, it is money. What do we think is important as Americans? We need to put our money toward housing, education.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right. And then so at Bremerton, to me, this is really, it's an easy discussion, or it's a simple discussion, a pretty clear discussion. Do we want to keep spending money on supporting automobiles? Do we want to keep pouring money into supporting automobiles in Bremerton, or do we want to cut back maybe on a little on that and move some of that money towards, like, maybe we can have a little less roads and a little more service. Maybe we can have, I just think there's room for that. I think it's a choice, and I think it's a choice that is difficult to make, and it's going to be a hard argument to make. But I think the city would be much better if we did take care of our low income people a little better. If the bottom wasn't so damn low in Bremerton, it just doesn't have to be so low.
But see, here's what becomes problematic is once you say you want all voices at the table, right? Mm-hmm. Those aren't their interests, because the voices at the table now, that's not their interest.
See,
right? They want. Go ahead.
But the only interests at the table now are the ones who are getting paid. I mean, mostly the people who are getting paid to be there. So, so getting more people at the table will absolutely benefit, I think. I think that, like, speaking up a city council has made a huge difference this year, for example.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. All I'm saying is there are voices that are at the table now, which is why the city is going in the direction that it's going in now, right? Their interests, by and large, have been met consistently in the city, right? So even though you bring these other voices, it is going to be a counter narrative, and it will be, when you bring poor people to the table or disenfranchised people to the table, are those numbers large enough to move the needle to say, hey, we're going to invest more in services and not in the other things that we invest money into?
I think it really comes down to the Democrats in this area, the liberal Democrats, and whether they're going to actually join to push for this. And this is what makes me really hopeful about this area, that we are going to be able to solve this, come up with some solutions in Bremerton, is that it's a solidly Democratic state. We've been talking about progressive ideas here ever since I don't see anybody not talking about progressive ideas in the political sphere here. They may back down on stuff, but so this whole area's been talking the talk for a long time. I think everybody's ready to walk the walk a little bit. So
here's what's so interesting is I'm not a liberal Democrat. I'm
right.
actually quite conservative, right?
Right.
But I'm a huge advocate of what we're trying to do, right? So I probably present as a liberal Democrat. Yeah. I'm not. You know what I'm saying? I have huge issues
and honestly, I don't know if it's because there is a middle ground. Because if you talk to people on the right about housing and all this stuff, they're the same thing. I mean, so yeah, I shouldn't make it a totally partisan issue, but I think that this area has shown a willingness to be more progressive than other parts of the country. How about that?
You know what? Yes, you are correct. I just wonder if it's even a progressive thing. I just feel like, and maybe it is. I believe
by progressive, I mean not democratic, but moving forward in a more loving, positive manner. So maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
I think we solve a lot of issues if we take capitalism out of housing and healthcare.
Yes. Yes. And it doesn't. And the thing is that it works for everybody. The people who are property owners. If you create a bunch of public housing, the price of their private property is going to go sky high. Taking care of poor people and giving them housing is not going to have a detrimental effect on your housing prices. And I don't know where that misconception comes from, but if you lift the whole community up, because they'll say, "Oh, you're going to drive down property prices. Don't put one of those in our neighborhood." But I just think that's a misconception.
Well, even if it is a truth, is that a bad thing?
Right.
Could you have an appreciating asset that appreciates at that exponentially, where it creates the problems that we have today? Again, if you take capitalism out of housing and healthcare, right, and folks are healthy mentally and physically, people have a place to live, and they're not working to live or living to work, right? I exist to try to pay my rent, right, or try to pay my mortgage. I mean, that's how you're going to move toward the Star Trek economy, if you will, is if you don't have to worry about those things. Those aren't there aren't issues. There's so many other things that capitalists can profit from, and thrive, and live at whatever level they want to live at, and experience their Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization, and do what they want to do without it being at the detriment to individuals in regards to just basic living.
And part of this is how we measure outcomes, I think, too. There's people say, well, what's the business model? I don't see the business model for that. And so what you're saying, some things don't fit the business model, right? So maybe they shouldn't be part of the business model. If you're looking at, especially like housing, well, I'm just going blank today. Sorry, it's been a long week.
No worries.
Yeah. So, what were we talking about?
We were just talking about not being the business model for housing,
right? And profit, and
oh,
I know what I was going to bring up. This is a good example. So there used to be this really great program down for Bremerton, for ML King Way. They had a project called Connect. Bremerton Connect, Kitsap Connect, not to be confused with another Connect program that's with the Point in Time. But anyways, what the program was it paid people to go down and do what people like Kimmy Siebens are doing now, and Bailey are doing. There are some severely needy people that are on ML King Way. There's always been, and these are people with severe disabilities, mental disabilities, just really, and so they had this program where they would have somebody go out and check on them every day and try to guide them to services. And but they canceled it because they said it was way too much money for too few people. The dollars for people served didn't match up, or didn't work out. And I think that a lot of our programs are measured that way as outcome. Like, okay, what is the dollar? How many people are served with this dollar? And that's always but there are cases, how much is too much to make to support somebody? I would say that, we should find out what that number is by trying it.
Yeah, I think that's a slippery slope, your argument there.
All I'm saying is that if you've got a woman who is in a wheelchair, covered with flies, and dying in a parking lot, and to help that person, takes somebody a full time, their full job. It's like taking care of somebody who needs to be taken care of is a full time. A cap was put on the worth of life. Yeah, that's what Elizabeth said. And how much is too much to spend to deal with people who are literally dying on our streets and could be helped, but they need a lot of help. So, but what's the slippery slope there?
So what I was going to say is the slippery slope is once you go down that road and you say, hey, what's enough money, right? For you're looking at these programs, and I hate some of the outcomes that these grants and contracts, because we're competing for them all the time, right? and they measure things that we don't measure, right? That's not important to us. But if you're saying that, then you'll have other special interest groups saying, hey, I've got these 10 people affected over here, and how much money should we, pour into that? So yeah, it should be 5 million over here to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not a good use of money. And so for me, what I would say in regards to Project Connect, while it was good for what it was, it's not a good use of the money in regards to what those folks need that are in that woman in that particular situation. She needs housing, right? And 24-hour care, right? And so federal on down, take them, take folks from out of the street and give them their basic needs. Housing, care, right?
Yeah, but with this particular woman, she actually owned a house. The city repossessed it, and she had enough money to get it. But for her and for most of these people, it's not a matter of. It's a caseworker. They need a human person to help them constantly, and maybe they need two people constantly to help them. But there are people. There are always going to be people in our society that need that level of care.
So do you want to give them two people to help them, but they're still homeless?
No, because right now right now this person I'm talking about is not homeless, and that's what I'm saying. That the Project Connect, from my understanding, was that they were able to work with them on a really intensive daily basis to get them the care they needed, to get them where they needed to go, and to just be there and work through all those troubles and all the problems of that. And it was successful. I mean, and the person that Bailey helped, this was a poor guy, had multiple sclerosis, just horrible. He was downtown for years. And the city and everybody said, "Oh yeah, it just costs too much to help that guy. We got to just write him off, basically."
Yeah, James.
And
so think about this. What if we flipped it on its head and we said, "Hey, you know what? We've got an aging population here, right? We already don't have enough doctors, right, or nurses, and part of that is there's so many barriers to entry to becoming a doctor or a nurse are already difficult, right? So we're having this huge gap. We also have an issue with, more and more people are going to need care, right? So we also don't value the things in the right way. We underpay our teachers, but we pay our athletes and our musicians absorbent amounts of money. So what if we flipped it on its head and we said, hey, we're going to pay our teachers, we're going to pay our healthcare staff, and we're going to build a new economy where folks can take care of people that need that type of care, and we're going to value that. So now it's like, hey, look, I can go and train as a in-home care person, and it may take a team of two. I'm going to be able to make a livable wage to take care of my family, and this person is being taken care of. That's what I mean by solving the actual problem and not, kind of solving the Band-Aid, right? I absolutely agree. Connect did some good things, but if we collectively said, hey, you know what? That's the nationalism piece. We're actually going to take care of us.
Yeah. I'm still failing to see why Connect is. If it's just automatically going to cost a lot of money to take care of these people. What's your other option?
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is that top-down view of it, right? Money has to come. We have to value Americans enough to say, hey, we are going to support and build infrastructure.
Yeah, let's bring this back to the city level.
Oh, wow. Right? You're going to throw my words
I know.
I love
it. So at the city level, is it a worthwhile expenditure for Connect?
The way that I'm talking about it, yes.
Yeah.
So now what you do is you take maybe some of the ARPA funds, or you take some of these other grants, and you create a vocational program. You go to the college and say, hey, you know what? We need to start a new vocational program, right? It'll generate some FTEs for you. We'll do this over here. And now we'll start producing our own, home care aides Connect model, right? And now those folks can get paid a livable wage to take care of those that can't take care of themselves, and we solve our own problems. Absolutely.
I love that.
And that's everyone at the table, right? Government, education, professions. It's everyone pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I like that. I think we should close the show on that note.
I like it. I'll give myself an applause. Gratuitous.
That's right.
All right. No, I think that's great. But these are hard issues. And, what I hope that the mayor and city council know, at least from my perspective, we should be critical, right? I mean, you ran for that position, so, your folks should be holding you accountable. At the same time, I will say I do understand the challenges. And while I don't understand the whole infrastructure and how government works, I'm learning this from Jeff as we come on every week and have these conversations. I do get the limitations and the challenges that exist in trying to create change and serve the entire community, right? That's why I think I agree with you. It's important that more voices are at the table so that we can collectively find those solutions. And so the example that I just gave might be everyone in this district, the college, KCR, Bremerton Housing Authority, those living on MLK, the renters around MLK, the businesses there saying, hey, well, if you created something like that, then you'd have housing, you'd have folks that can provide that care. Those folks get a livable wage. That lady that you talked about, she stays in her home. It doesn't need to be taken, right? The businesses are able to thrive because they're not experiencing the negative impacts of homelessness from a business standpoint, and customers coming and growth and all that good stuff and profits. And we're doing the work and we're changing the city and the culture.
Yep. The only thing I would add to that in terms of ML King Way, I think that the primary voice really has to be the people living on the street. Their voice should take precedence over all the other voices at this point, because they are the ones that are suffering right now. And so we really need to hear what they have to say, because they probably know best about their own situation, how to change it, or I don't know. They should have the most input, I think.
I'll hold my comment on that.
Okay. Okay.
Not that I disagree with that, but that's you know what? I'm going to say it. So earlier in the conversation, you were talking about everyone being at the table. And so my thought is, and I'm not talking about people on ML King. So again, we're having an intellectually honest conversation.
Okay.
There are times when we hear like, hey, I voted for Clinton because he was sexy and he was fine and he played the saxophone. It's like, should that person actually have a vote? You know what I mean? It's like, yes, everyone should have their voices heard, but there's a level of ignorance that can come from voting on concerns. And I don't mean ignorant as in the pejorative, but ignorant in not knowing, not understanding the dynamics of it. It's like, well, nope, I vote for this. And it's like, you have no context on it. It sounds good, right? So anyway, that's my thought on that.
Cool.
Ching.
All right, this has been a tough hour, boy, but good one.
Yeah, no, it's
I'm
a lot
coming
of
away
fun.
with lots to think about.
No, I appreciate you for sure, and I hope that everyone else is able to take something good from this conversation. Again, you're always welcome to join us in the chat with the discussion. Please type, push back on our thoughts. This is a place of the collective, right? This is what we hope it to be. And not just Jeff's ideas or Marwan's ideas, but the community's ideas. And these things that we take here, we can take to city council, we can take to the mayor, and hopefully create change. So we're trying to create some spaces, create a knowledge base for everyone here, and all voices are welcome. Well, except for the sheet-wearing clans people that Jeff was talking about earlier. All right, so for Jeff Campbell, I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Civic Second, y'all. The Conduit. We'll see you not next Sunday, but the Sunday after.